The United States, post-Cold War and after September 11th, Domestic Policy Edition. This video is going to look at challenges the United States faced after the end of the Cold War and following the terrorist attacks on September 11th. This video focuses on the impact of those events at home in America. This video covers U.S. History Content Statement 32, focusing on domestic policy. The United States faces ongoing social, political, national security, and economic challenges in the post-Cold War era and following the attacks on September 11, 2001. For a quick refresher, remember that the Cold War was the primary foreign policy issue for America for several decades following World War II. It influenced foreign policy decisions such as the decision of the U.S. to go to war in Korea and Vietnam, as well as domestic decisions relating to life at home in America, including increased spending on the military to protect our country. The Cold War was not a real war, but rather a rivalry between the democratic U.S. and the communist Soviet Union from 1945 until 1991. Most of the U.S. foreign policy decisions were designed to prevent the spread of communism around the world, especially in the first 20 years of the Cold War. There was a very real fear of nuclear war between the U.S. and Soviet Union that could end the world as people knew it. Largely for economic reasons, the Soviet Union and the governments of other Eastern European countries collapsed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. With that, the Cold War was over. The end of the Cold War meant America didn't have a big military threat. As a result, defense spending by the American government decreased, as you can see in the chart on the right. From 1988 to 2000, there was a very large drop in defense spending. The increase you see around the year 2000 is following the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. Another impact on the economy has been globalization, which we talked about last week. As the world has become more interconnected, we buy many more things that are made in other countries. Globalization, along with decrease in defense spending, has led to a decrease in manufacturing jobs and increase in the U.S. trade deficit. Ask your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, possibly even an older sibling or cousins. Anyone living in America who's over the age of 25 likely remembers where they were on September 11, 2001, when they found out about the terrorist attacks. It was the worst terrorist attack in American history. 4 commercial airplanes were hijacked by terrorists. 2 were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. 1 was flown into the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C. A 4th crashed in Shanksville, PA, a town in southwest Pennsylvania. That 4th plane was headed back for Washington, D.C., likely either the U.S. Capitol building or the White House, before passengers fought back against the terrorists, causing the plane to crash. Almost 3,000 people were killed. It is one of the saddest days in American history. The terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, took credit for the attack, and many changes have occurred in America as a result. There have been many new domestic challenges related to national security since 9/11. Among those challenges is the fear that more terrorist attacks could happen in the U.S. similar to 9/11. Since September 11th, 2001, there have been 107 people killed in America as a result of incidents classified as domestic terrorism, according to History.com. That is a lot of people, but the fear of another terrorist event happening in America that would lead to a similar death toll as 9/11 would have made was on the minds of many Americans after 9/11. It was almost, assumed that there would be another, maybe multiple more large-scale terrorist attacks. Thankfully, that has not happened since then, but it was definitely on the minds of many people in the years following 9/11. Attempts to prevent another terrorist attack like 9/11 has led to debate over the need to balance national security with civil liberties. Our nation does not want to see another terrorist attack. So as a result, the government needs to make it a priority to protect the people and the security of our nation. The terrorists who carried out the 9/11 terrorist attacks lived in America for months prior to the attack and were trained to fly planes at flight schools in America. Better government surveillance could have possibly found out about the plan and caught them before they carried out the attack. That belief led to pushes to enhance the government's ability to protect national security. Shortly after the September 11th terrorist attack, the USA Patriot Act was passed by Congress. This law significantly increased law enforcement's ability to conduct surveillance of suspected terrorists. Once again, catching terrorists before they attack is a good thing. However, the increased surveillance called into question protection of civil liberties or individual freedoms. The Patriot Act allowed for more surveillance such as wiretaps, home searches, accessing individuals' internet search history, even the books that they check out at a library. The wide-ranging reach of these government powers calls into question whether or not it violates the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Also, it has led to fears that individuals' free speech is also infringed upon, as the words people say could lead to that increased government surveillance, even if the person isn't a terrorist. Critics of the Patriot Act believe that the government has abused the powers the law has granted the government. Balancing national security versus protecting civil liberties has been a struggle multiple times in American history, including after 9/11. Increased government surveillance can definitely catch criminals or terrorists before they do something bad. But when that surveillance is increased, it isn't just catching the, quote, bad guys. It inevitably leads to spying on many innocent, regular people as well, and that goes against our basic principles as a nation. To relate this issue to the present day, think about the mask debate. Although the recommendations of health experts have changed over time, which has led to some of the public pushback, you certainly are aware that some people do not wear a mask because they don't like being told what to do by the government and feel that it infringes on their freedoms. The counter argument to that viewpoint is that the health experts believe that mask wearing will protect the health of many Americans. This is that same national security versus civil liberties debate. Should masks be mandatory based on the reasoning that mask wearing slows the spread of the virus, thus improving national health or national security? Or is it an infringement on people's civil liberties since the government is forcing them to wear something they otherwise wouldn't? If you've ever flown on an airplane, you may remember that getting through security into your plane can be somewhat of an inconvenience. You wait in a long line, take off your shoes, maybe your belt, put them on a conveyor belt, walk through a metal detector. Possibly you or someone in your group could have been pulled aside to have your bag searched or go through additional screening. These enhanced security measures are in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. There was airport security before 9/11, but it was much more limited than it is now. Prior to 9/11, you could walk right up to the gate to say goodbye to someone before they got on a plane, or welcome them when they got off the plane, or just sit and watch planes take off and land. The 9/11 terrorist attacks made clear that tougher security measures were needed. The hijackers used box cutters as weapons against the flight crew and passengers. Those box cutters were legally allowed to be on a plane at that time, as were other items that could be used as a weapon. The U.S. government created a new federal agency known as the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, after 9/11 to provide enhanced security at airports and train stations. Unfortunately, throughout American history, there have been many cases of prejudice, discrimination, and violence against various groups of people. 9/11 led to this situation again. The terrorists who attacked America were Muslims from Middle Eastern countries. Since 9/11, there has been an increase in Islamophobia, dislike and prejudice of Islam and Muslims. Almost immediately after 9/11, there were a number of hate crime attacks against innocent Muslims in America. And those attacks weren't just immediately following 9/11. The number of hate crime attacks in recent years against people who are Muslim continues to be significantly more than what had happened in the years prior to 9/11. There has also been an increase in xenophobia, a dislike or prejudice against people from other countries. President Trump, while campaigning for president in 2016, played on this dislike of people from other countries by regularly stating that he would build a wall between America and Mexico. This was one of the issues that he used to get enough support to be elected president. We're now going to look at several air test questions related to these topics. The first question: how did U.S. national security policy change at the end of the Cold War? Was it A, the U.S. withdrew from NATO, B, the U.S. reduced defense spending, C, the U.S. initiated containment policies, or D, the U.S. eliminated its nuclear program? Which of the following were challenges faced after 9/11? A, maintaining a balance of power with the Soviet Union, B, countering the use of terrorism, C, competing in the space race, or D, balancing national security and civil liberties? An excerpt from a speech by President Barack Obama at the Department of Justice on January 17, 2014 is shown. Obama said, "Relationships with foreign intelligence services have expanded, and our capacity to repel cyber attacks have been strengthened. And taken together, these efforts have prevented multiple attacks and saved innocent lives, not just here in the United States, but around the globe. And yet, in our rush to respond to a very real and novel set of threats, the risk of government overreach also became more pronounced. We saw in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, our government engaged in enhanced interrogation techniques that contradicted our values. As a senator, I was critical of several practices such as warrantless wiretaps, and all too often new authorities were instituted without adequate public debate." Which challenge facing the U.S. in the post-9/11 era does President Obama address in this excerpt? A, the unwillingness of countries to share surveillance data in the war against terror. B, the obstacle of obtaining congressional approval to engage in preemptive wars. C, the difficulty in balancing national security needs with the protection of civil liberties. Or D, the international objections to U.S. development of advanced cyber warfare capabilities.